welcome to this session. Welcome everyone in the room and also on the live stream. I'm Harriet Saddington and I'll be chairing this session, Yes Ball Games, Designing Neighbourhoods for Happy and Healthy Childhoods. First of all, I'm going to introduce our expert panel for the day. So we have, first up, I'm going to introduce Dinah, co-founder of ZCD Architects and author of All to Play For, How to Design Child-Friendly Housing, which was published in January of this year. We have, to my left here, Johnny Anstead, co-founder of Town, a profit with purpose developer responsible for industry-leading projects such as Marmalade Lane in Cambridge, as well as upcoming major developments in Hartree and Northstowe. Along next to Dinah there, we have Marie Williams, a playful chartered engineer, TEDx speaker, and CEO of Dream Networks, an organisation that has helped create inclusive play spaces for over 60,000 children in the UK and Africa. And we have Simon Battisti, Executive Director of the Relationship Centre, a non-profit research and design agency based in Tirana that helps local governments deliver public space projects that centre the needs of children. So please give a warm welcome to our panel. So, play and child-friendly design, both issues that have thankfully been in the news quite a bit lately, whether around the potential introduction of play sufficiency legislation in England, campaigns to remove no ball game signs, or the recent Play Commission report about for Raising the Nation. But headlines aside, we urgently need to understand what to actively do to put play and child-centred design within new developments, across cities, and in places whatever their socio-economic status. So this panel has been brought here to discuss just that and cut right to the issue. We have Dinah, who's literally written the book on how to design child-friendly places. Marie, who works directly with children in the UK and internationally. Simon, working closely with city leaders and decision makers in Europe. And Johnny, as a developer on the ground, jumping hurdles. So for the running order, we're going to hear from Dinah first about All to Play For, and then reflections from the panel before opening up to audience Q&A at the end. So with no further ado, over to you, Dinah.
Okay, right, so I've got my clicker. Oh, and I've got my, can I have the first slide? Thank you. I can't see the first slide, I'm really sorry, I can't. Can I see the first slide on your screen? Thank you. Otherwise I'm in the dark. I'll just start anyway.
It's over to the left there, if you can.
No, can't see it either. I can see nothing on the screen now. Okay, this is us. I'll just make it up. Hey, well done, thank you. This is us. We are what we say experts in people-centered city making and development and design. The book is really centered on child-friendly housing. It's really selling well, I'm pleased to say, and is reviewed by Ollie Wainwright in The Guardian and various other people. I'm going to explain where it all started quickly. I've got about 18 minutes, I'm timing myself. But I'm also going to refer to the title of this talk, which is Yes, Ball Games, which I think is really important. This is a picture of my son, who's now 17, but this is when we were doing a play street in Hackney, which is one of the first, in fact, it might even be the first in London, importing the play street initiative from Bristol, where it started with Playing Out, and just kind of showing what play outside your doorstep looks like and realizing how much fun children have doing this, playing together. In this instance, a similar kind of day to yesterday. It was very hot and we got out squirters and the kids were just overjoyed, playing on the tarmac amongst the cars. Not football in this instance, but quite often football was being played. So that kind of just, how do you kick a ball around in a space? Doesn't have to be a pitch, but how do you kind of do that in a way that just is very natural. So I'm just going to weave that in. Another photograph of people playing football. And interestingly, this is in Hackney. So after we started doing these play streets, and then there was an event at the GLA at the time, quite a while ago, Boris Johnson was still the mayor. And the focus really was on kind of the volunteer movement and the streets teams. And I was thinking, this is a planning issue. This is an urban design issue. We need to be able to know how and what the conditions are for this kind of play to happen. Because interestingly, although it's not happening on our streets because they're lined with cars, there is still some sort of space for it to happen on estates across Hackney and the rest of London and the UK. And I said to the borough really naively, hey, do you know where the play is happening? Is there any evidence? And of course they said no. And do you have any money to find out? Because it seems like a really important thing. And they said also no. So we had some students at University of East London at our disposal. And we asked them to, just checking it's going to the next slide. There we go. I asked them as part of their coursework to start doing some observational research so we could look at what the spatial considerations were. Where were the spaces that children were able to play out, and what also happened when they played out in spaces? So we did a lot of standing around, observational work, and people counting. And that was really kind of off the back of Jan Gale's work, so kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, if you like. So this work led to further work with Homes England, where we started to look at schemes across England. And this is spread in the Architects' Journal at the time, and Barking Riverside, where lots of playing out was occurring. And we could see that there were some elements that if they were in place, children would play. It was kind of that simple. If you could get straight out of your front door or your back door, children would play for hours in spaces. It wasn't really about the playground. It wasn't about how well equipped it was. So off the back of that research and the mapping that we did then, we did another exercise where we looked at the de Beauvoir estate in Hackney, because we were interested in kind of higher density schemes, multi-level schemes, and whether we could kind of, again, plan and understand a map for that. But we also were able to start working with children. So we were doing 240 hours of data across a number of spaces, and also talking to children about where and how they played and trying out different sort of techniques. That resulted in this map, which is the map we still use today. And essentially what's happening on this estate here is all the white are buildings, all the grey are, light grey is roads, dark grey is private space, and everything else is kind of readily available and accessible for people to use. And what we've done is we've categorized all this space according to 4 principles. Is it overlooked? Is it car-free? Is it directly accessible from homes, as in can you just get straight out of your house into that space? And also, is it connected to another space? So do you use it to walk home? Do you use it to get from A to B? And using that kind of mapping principle, it correlated with the observational data, which showed us that red square in the top right-hand corner is where the children were playing out. Terrible play equipment, but that, and worse than some of the other spaces, but that's where they chose to play because those elements were in place. So they were able to look out the window, see their friends playing, they were able to get down, they didn't need to cross the road, their parents could see them. That kind of doorstep play was where they were all the time, and that's really helpful for the borough, who's looking at infill development, to look at the sites that are less well used by the community, less well used by children, but also less well used by adults. So these are the 4 principles, and since that time we've been using them again and again. We've been using them with talking to residents. It's a really simple way of understanding space. It always kind of correlates with their understanding and their use of space. So where's the best space in your local estate? It will have these elements in place. Like the Pembury estate, where they were playing in that car park, it may not be totally car-free, but if everything else is in place, that's where people will be using the space. So that led us to getting a scheme that we could build for design for Catalyst Housing, which was around these principles, homes around a garden. It's in Buckinghamshire, so it's outside London, it's quite low density, but we really thought carefully about the relationship between the home and that shared space, so that children could be outside as much as possible without parents having to kind of look after them. So this is a section through the home. You've got a connection to the street, so that you're in the kitchen, you can see into the street, but also right through a private courtyard and into that garden, with sight lines being maintained, so that if you're sitting as an adult, sitting as an adult, or if you're a child, you can see into that space, you can see where your friends are playing, and you can go outside. So that's what it looks like in real life, and that's what happens. And okay, there's lots of plastic and there's lots of toys outside strewn around, and children aren't the tidiest people in the world, and they're certainly not the quietest, but that's where they are, playing those games of football casually, where they're joining their friends, or they're cycling around those spaces, where they're bouncing around. And that's where the parents are then able to just get on with their lives. And so that amount of time, that if you are a parent, you recognise that standing in a park, let's be honest, unless you want to go and talk to another parent, is really, really boring. But it's not what kids find boring. But this gives the kind of best of both worlds. You get on with what you need to do. Kids get on with the playing. So I'm doing pretty well, I think. This is the book. We've all got a copy. That was the kind of requirement from Christine that everybody read it. So that was useful. I've sold at least 4 books. Thanks. No, it's a bit few more now. It's got a lovely cover designed by the RBA Publishing, and it's selling really well, I'm pleased to say, because it's very easy to read, right? It's easy for politicians, it's easy for non-designers, and it kind of spells it out step by step. And it was useful for me to sort of start at the beginning and think about where we come from and what the kind of literature is and the history is of kind of children's play. And this is a photograph, not of mine, but from the internet, of what play might have been like in the 1970s, the sort of nostalgic period that we hark back to. It's really easy to say kids are all on screens, but they're on screens because this kind of play, this kind of social fun that we used to have as kids just isn't available anymore if you live on streets like this. You can't get out there and do this kind of stuff with your friends because it's lined with cars. The cars are also moving through that space, and they've got a lot bigger. So it's just really, really unsafe. Parents are obviously not going to let their children out, but also children aren't stupid. They haven't got the space and time to play in that space. So this is what we've lost. And we're struggling, I think, with understanding how to kind of bring back that kind of doorstep space, and still allow, deliveries and emergency access and kind of blue badge holders to move through these spaces, and to think about how children can play. So what this book looks at then is, first of all, and it explains how we do the mapping, where we might have got it right. So looking back a little bit further than schemes that are recent, the chapter 2 draws on some schemes that were designed in the 1970s, where we've got the real long view of what it's like for communities to live there, adults and children. And this is the amazing Highgate Newtown, which is a case study in the book written by Joe McCafferty and Rachel Stevenson about what it was like to bring their kids up on this estate. This, for the architects in the room, is the plan and then the section. And you can see that the cars have been buried underneath the homes. The plan's a bit tricky to read quickly, but it has this fantastic quote on the side, the kind of ordinariness of what happens when you design a place that a child can walk home by themselves means that when you're putting out the bins, you feel lucky. And I think as an architect, that's really what you want to be doing. You want to be making people's lives better in an everyday way. And what's really interesting, not to me now, of course, but is where children play on this estate, right outside literally right outside their front door, not necessarily in the prescribed places, but what that does in terms of the community and how they feel about it. Another estate near me, which is the Christchurch estate, and this kind of shows how you build up the map and understand the connectivity and the spaces where children can play literally on their doorstep as young as 2. As soon as they can move, they'll be out in that space, and parents will have the front doors open and they'll be cooking and doing other things. And that's what this community feels like. It's not always perfect, there's lots of kind of maybe noise and maybe like kids in other people's houses when they like maybe need to go home. But that's where like WhatsApp is great to kind of like allow the community to function properly. chapter 3 looks at, well, how do you bring in the voice of young people? So how do you start talking to them about how they use space and what matters? This is Aberfeldy in Poplar, which is a really interesting scheme that we worked on with Poplar Harker, and how we really included the voices of teenagers and primary school children, and how that really kind of fed into the engagement with the adults. And then the really important for us, Earls Court development, where we've been working with actually an intergenerational group, but the really critical thing here is that there's children in this panel. They are under the age of 18. Some of them were 14 when they started, and they're growing up, and hopefully they'll stay, because this is a long-term development where we're thinking about people with disabilities, people with older people, people who are neurodivergent, and young people, and having conversations about what makes an inclusive place. And I think every development now should have an intergenerational panel, and whilst I absolutely love talking to children and young people, I think having their voices in the room with their community is one of the most critical things we've learned from this. So just to finish in the last couple of minutes, some case studies to make it super easy. And all these case studies really, and here's a kind of technical page, focus on courtyard perimeter block schemes, because that's the kind of the typology that we're often using. It's got Marmalade Lane in, of course, as a really good example in terms of the layout. It's obviously a co-housing scheme, but how that layout works and how efficient it is compared to the house builder scheme, how we can then scale that up at high density, and how this is Port Loop, what that means for residents, the impact that that has on them, places to play football, again, just casual kickabouts. And then other schemes where you can see how what happens when you make it car-free, how this courtyard in King's Crescent is easy for children to get to. They can see their friends. That's where they'll go down. Again, that's where they'll be playing football. Not always easy amongst the allotments, but that's a thing that we really need to recognise. And then how that works in terms of the heat mapping, back to the 4 principles that I mentioned before, and how that colours and creates spaces that are really useful and easy for children to get to. The book took me abroad, so like looking at places like Copenhagen, where you walk through those courtyards with your bike, you park your bike, you chat to your neighbours. This is connected to another space. This is part of your journey home. This is where children play. This is where adults chat. And then again, this idea of overlooking this big space in Gascoigne, also really easy to get to. Could be a little bit easier with that central space is a little bit orange rather than red because it's surrounded by roads, but it's pretty good. And then just to finish, which I think I'm perfectly 15 minutes, it's even better, is some free to download information. So we are really keen that everything we do is kind of available for others to try out as well. So on the left-hand side, our website, Voice Opportunity Power, which is a toolkit which is for engaging with young people, 6 workshops, kind of typically designed for regeneration schemes, but also looking at existing schemes. And then the Family Voices Toolkit, which we worked on for the Van Leer Foundation, bringing them into working with Earls Court, where we've really focused and had the privilege to work with families of very young children. And that's a really different kind of approach, where you're needing to, obviously, when you're talking about children under 5, be talking to their parents and how much they need to be part of this, and how that's made us reconsider even issues like the London Plan and whether that works in terms of this idea of doorstep play for the under 5s in very high density. Come and talk to me later about this, because I've been saying to various people at the GLA, we need to be rethinking the London Plan and bringing some of that up to date. The Inclusive Safety Toolkit, which has come from the work we've done with the Public Realm Inclusivity Panel at Earls Court, making it really super easy for other people to sort of follow similar methodology. And then the, amongst other things, the Select Committee Inquiry, which has been a really, really important moment, I think, to bring this to Parliament. And back to the book being really simple and easy to read, just, oh my God, you have to spell it out to politicians in simple terms. Sorry if there's any in the room, but Jesus.
Hopefully there are some in the room.
Yeah, like, you know, this is connected to everything. If we don't do this, we'll get, and we've got it already, children trapped indoors. with parents not able to let them out, not able to let them do the thing that naturally, as a species, they're designed to do, which is to meet up with other kids, to play safely, they will turn to their screens. The screens are not the reason children don't play out. The reason children don't spend the 85% of their waking hours not in school, outside with their friends, is because we've designed deliberately or not deliberately, the environment for them not to be out there. And it's a massive problem. It's a problem now in terms of mental health and just their daily happiness. And it's a problem that we have baked in, if we're not careful, for all eternity. So this is a wake-up call, I think, and a way that we need to stop and think how to do this better. So yeah, buy the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinah. So hopefully those 4 child-friendly principles should be at the forefront of your mind, whether you are an architect or a developer or a politician. I've got lots of questions about kind of lack of those featuring in policy guidance, so it's good that you picked up on that at the end there. I'm going to hand over to the panel now. I'm going to start with Marie. I think, Dinah there was talking a lot about understanding the kind of everyday experience of children and speaking directly to them, which I know is very much part of what you do, Marie. So please tell us about your work and how you came to be a playful engineer.
So I'm going to start with telling you a slight, small, hopefully interesting story about making the impossible possible. So a key part of the work we do at Dream Networks is that we co-design play spaces with children as young as 4. And I remember not too long ago, maybe about 3-4 years ago, we did a work in Southwark in London in an area called Walworth, which is it's one of the poorest wards of London, extremely ethnically diverse. And one of the girls said that when they started the program, they thought it was impossible, but by the end, they realized it was possible, so making the impossible possible. And that ability to, beyond hearing a child's voice, actually care for their perspective, give them the agency and the power to design, is a reason I'm a playful engineer, and also the reason we exist at Dream Networks, to address the inequality in who has the ability to navigate, influence our built environment. So we design with children, and a key thing about designing with children is that need for plurality, so that diversity in the way you work. In Dinah's amazing book, she speaks about walking tours, which many of you may have done. As you're walking with children, they're able to observe, they're able to give feedback, and that's able to inform your design practice or your methodology. And particularly for us, it's about ensuring the children are actually design partners. So a walking tour enables them to be a design partner, but actually giving them the ability to, beyond inform or be consulted, design with us. So a key part of that is we use a range of methods. So we use Play-Doh, we use typical mapping mechanisms, we use storytelling, we use kinesthetic ways of designing. So we did one project where we worked with the children, we went to the space, we did something called Play Bingo, and very playful, so whatever we design is typically very playful. And maybe some of you played bingo, I played bingo, no shame. And yeah, we basically had got the data from observations, from survey data, to understand the key taxonomies of play they were engaging with, what they engaged with, as well as what they potentially lacked or wanted. And then they went into the space, and they had like different images and, I guess, design prompts, and they used their bodies to design in that space. That ability to have that plurality is what enables us to be able to create cities where, I guess, like David Harvey says, like and to be able to have a right to the city, we recognize that often it's top down. The children, the people excluded, the neurodiverse, the BME, that massive group of people, elderly, a range of disabled people, a range of people are not part of the story. So being able to use a range of methods that enables them to design, understand the impact of the design, and have the power to impact their world. And for us, we really focus on working with businesses, communities, engineering companies to say, beyond designing with the children, we want it to be built. So you basically don't really design with the children unless we're going to build their spaces, which I think is really important, because too often we may go in, we maybe give a child a 2D map. And in reality, 2D maps can be really hard for a lot of people to understand. Or you might give them a 3D map, and then they suggest a different idea, but often that idea may be informed by practices things they've done or experiences they've had, as opposed to their lived experiences. Part of the book as well, I'm going to refer to it a lot, it speaks about play being intrinsically motivated, freely chosen. But that ability to freely choose your way of designing, playing, is impacted by what your environment affords. Often, the work we do internationally, I was working with WHO, World Health Organization, acronyms, and they're doing an amazing toolkit on spaces, which will come out soon. And they basically have different ways of looking at spaces for children, it being planned, it being informal, it being a slum. And the ability to recognize that when we're creating these kind of spaces for children and saying that a space is informal or it's a slum compared to being planned, means that we're often wanting the people who are in the informal or the slum space to have that planned experience, to have that level of spatial ordering. But that ability to have social gathering in a courtyard in what we see in our Western ways of thinking could be an open space, but it could also be a street. And you have to navigate being able to work with that car, being able to navigate how you're able to look at overlooking, that's also part of the book, and looking at overlooking and how does intergenerational play fit into this. So just to round it up, our key focus is really seeing how we can bring that plurality in the way we design our spaces, partner with organizations to make those spaces come to life, and give the children the power and the agency to challenge the way we reimagine our environment.
Thank you, Marie. I'm going to pass over to Simon, actually, to respond to that a bit. And recently, Simon, he's the creative director of the Start with Children Summit in Bratislava, an annual conference convening on urban childhoods. And hopefully there were a lot of enlightened decision makers, perhaps in countries outside of where we are, really recognizing the health impacts of child-centered design. Please tell us a bit more about that and what we're doing wrong and how they're doing it right over there, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, the Start with Children Summit began, we've done it for 2 years now with the mayor and the city of Bratislava. And the name says it all. I mean, it comes from a desire to kind of lead in with cities to center children and everything that they do, essentially. And I mean, so I want to come to the book, and then I'm going to actually come back to the summit a little bit. So the other work that I do is in Tirana. I run a nonprofit there on the ground, and we work on a school streets program with the city of Tirana. Right now, we've built 12 school streets. The city has tendered 20 more, and in this moment, we're making a design guideline about how to talk to other people about how to standardize what those are. And I got to read Dinah's book a year ago, which almost in kind of a draft phase, and one thing that really stuck out to me is the focus on behavior and understanding what children do through observation, and then bringing that back into distilling that in these 4 observations, which are really, really simple. And I think what's so powerful about it is that there's all kinds of details, and we want to leave it to the architects in a way to talk about the materiality and a lot of the design decisions. But if you bring it down to those 4 clear principles, kind of anything else is going to be okay. Anything else is going to work. And it's something that I also am reflecting a lot about in the design guidelines for school streets, because in the Albanian context, we don't have, it's very difficult to have a construction standard. There's not very much enforcement, et cetera. And so what we're trying to do is, what do you really need to boil it down to? What needs to be boiled down to be able to communicate the spirit of what this street is supposed to do? Then you, builder, designer, architect, everything else, do it however you want. Use a different color brick. You like also, and then of course you bring it to the community. Anything you want, but it's got to do these. It's got to do these things, and I think now that essentially what I would tell people is, when you're building a school street, go in your city to essentially what you think is the most successful public space. Observe the behaviors that are taking place in that public space, and then recreate those in front of a school. That's it. So the design guideline could be 100 pages, or it could be one paragraph, and that would be the paragraph. If you, like literally a one-page design guideline would be to go and observe what those behaviors are, and to bring it to play. What we have always done since the beginning of this program is to not design or not build play equipment at all, to keep it really, really inexpensive, to keep maintenance really inexpensive long term. The observations about what kids are doing, leaving it to them completely, is just to say, essentially, protect them from cars and everything, whatever, like let them be them. Let them just do what they want to do. Let their parents do what they want to do. Just make a protected space. And it's actually super, super simple. So just to then very quickly bring it back to Start with Children, this conference that happens once a year is really trying to bring together designers, politician or political level folks, and funders all into the same room to talk about how we can advance a child-focused planning agenda in every city. And what's cool about it is that it's starting to attract people who are interested in this, who might not know what to do, might not know how to get started. And this is really where, what we're trying to do is say, it's a rule of thumb, start with kids. Think about what that might look like in a special school streets program, whatever it might be. Start with kids, and this is going to build out a really, what becomes a quite popular agenda, typically.
And as well as those people in the room, you also had children speaking, didn't you, on the stage? And I think that's, as Dinah said, the sort of strength of an intergenerational panel when you have young people and older people, so they can hear from each other and then be able to communicate. The young people who don't have a vote and don't drive a car and don't have the same sway, but hopefully they can share their view. Brilliant. Johnny, how realistic is it to start with these child-friendly principles, whether it's Dinah's 4 principles? In developments in the UK, it's not the standard way, but it is the right way. Tell us, about that.
Cool. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for having me today, and well done, Dinah, for this. It's great. I'm Johnny Anstead, one of the founders of Town. We're an SME developer, and our sort of gateway to all this was through building Marmalade Lane co-housing in Cambridge, where almost through the kind of some of the work that was done with the community, which undoubtedly included the kids of the parents who were going to be living in this new co-housing community, a lot of groundwork was done in creating a scheme that ultimately has become really good for children's play. And I think that we have been benefited from the analysis that Dinah's done on the scheme through her book and sort of through the interviews that she's undertaken with residents to kind of understand actually what is it about that set of circumstances that works well, which are principally down to the 4 principles. It gives really lovely spaces which are directly accessible, overlooked, well connected, and free of cars, because cars are moved to the edge of the development instead of being in the middle of the development, as would have been the case if it had followed the kind of prevailing design code, actually. And I suppose that through that, it's meant that we've really sort of been inspired to kind of try and push forward with this as a really central agenda for the company. And in doing so, we've been, there's 2 or 3 things that we've sort of been trying to integrate into all of our work, which are around working with children through the design process. So we've done that in Cambridge for Hartree. We've done it in Wolverton through using Minecraft with a non-profit called Block Builders. And more recently, we've been working with school kids at Northstowe, where we're working in joint venture with Hill and with Landowner Homes England to sort of do something similar to Marmalade Lane, again, co-housing, but really sort of centralising the role and the needs of children in the scheme. But I'm not going to lie, it's actually, it's really challenging in a number of ways. The first one is with us, really, which is that it's super easy to forget almost to sort of think about these things as, oh yeah, we do all these lovely things and we're all well-meaning and everything, and almost like to forget that it means some hard decisions and that you've got to really lock it in through process along the way, and you've got to continually look at the design and go, hang on, are we actually practicing what we preach here? Or is there a risk that we're sort of saying one thing and then kind of almost walking down a route that takes you, frankly, down the path of least resistance? That's a risk for me at the moment. It's a risk for us. I think that that's not helped by the fact that there are a whole bunch of policy and other contextual pieces that come into your question, make things quite challenging. The first is, I'm not going to lead off with cars, but the first challenge is around bins, and we talked about it at the Select Committee last year, didn't we? That literally if I talk to my team about what they're asked to contend with through the planning process and how much they're challenged by planners to think about children versus how much they're asked by planners to think about how they cater for the needs of bins, it will always be the latter taking precedence and almost never any of the former. And when you think about it societally, that's absolutely bonkers. It's beyond mad. Nobody ever said that bins are our future, did they? Just reflecting on it. But the second one is about cars, which is again, it's a really challenging point, because however much we sort of know that what you're saying is right, that car-free spaces are integral to getting this to work, it's really hard because policy requires us to deliver cars. We're working often in locations which are not fully car independent, like Northstowe. Where there's a reality to that, and also there's a market perception which is enormous, that people will always value very, very easy parking and basically adult convenience for that very expensive object versus a kind of basic idea that people who are caregivers and who value their children will also practice what they, put that kind of into practice and prize the idea that their children can play out safely. So all of those things kind of are challenging. However, this is great and timely because it does boil it back down to these 4 principles. And I called Dinah a couple of weeks ago and said, I'm really worried about things kind of not being quite as good as they should be. And she said 2 things. One was, let me do a proper design review and analyse it and do the shading that you talked about through the built schemes. And 2 was, it's all about the 4 principles. If you think about that, it's very easy to communicate. It's a really good read. We all need the inspiration of it, but also it's really practical. Get back to those 4 principles. I encourage anybody who recognises the same issues as I've been, the same challenges and tensions that I've talked about. This is a great way of kind of getting your team to be pointed in the right direction. So thanks, Dinah.
Thank you. And I mean, you are seeing as well that there is the market, positivity around these places once they get delivered. It's just kind of jumping the hurdles to get there.
We enormously need more data to show that people prize the things that I've been talking about, because at the moment there's too much data to say that people value convenience of parking, convenience of this and that, very private domain type of, big gardens, but they don't value street. And that's not because the evidence is comparable and somebody said value scheme A versus scheme B. It's just that scheme B literally doesn't exist at the moment, except for in a handful of cases. So anybody who's got land, who's a policy maker, who's interested in this, should be trying to create pilot projects. We've got new towns coming around the corner, and if we don't have data to show that people value places for their children to play and that consumers are going to actually embrace that, then actually all the new towns are going to be built in exactly the same way as all the existing problematic places. So I think that we need to test stuff out, see what works, and and celebrate it when that's going to mean some things not working as well as we want, because there's a risk in innovation, isn't there? But I think that it's if we want to diversify, we have to try doing things differently.
Yeah, and hear from young people in sort of post-occupancy or as it's going. Okay, I'm going to over to you. If anyone has got any questions, please ask the panel. If you can just introduce yourself and just state if it's for a particular member of the panel. Right here, there's a question in the middle. Oh, you're going over there. That's fine.
Thank you.
Hello.
I'll be quick. My name's Anna. I work for Haringey Council. Thank you. It's so interesting. It's kind of in two parts. The first was for Marie, and just wondering if there's anything that you've noticed that we could learn from informal architecture, because obviously it is the opposite of that sort of top-down design. And then more broadly, we've spoken about new developments and precedents of good historic developments, but I wonder if you have any thoughts about retrofit of bad existing developments.
So I think I'll touch on two things. I think it's valuing the ability to be flexible and improvise. And I do think it's really important to have requirements and have toolkits. We've actually got toolkits as well ourselves, and it helps things to be scalable and to standardize. But informal mechanisms of urbanism really speak to the experiences that people have that are improvised, that are based on stories, that are based on their cultural and social identities, intersectionalities within that. And that actually takes time. So that's one thing I would say, like being able to recognize that your methodology will potentially take more time. And the output, in reality, it may not be physically that obvious, the change you've made. Second bit, and it kind of speaks to something that Johnny said, particularly in my academic work, looking at play and the value it is to people. We've developed a model called play prosperity, and it's thinking of actually the prosperity that people get from play and measure it in a manner that policy people, urban planners will consider. So thinking about social cohesion, thinking about talent development, thinking about learning, thinking about physical development, mental development from play, and using indicators that speak to the community. So like a citizen, I'm using a lot of terminology, but a citizen science or community-driven approach, and using their data to govern what we present about the prosperity we get from what they've created. Because data really is king, but often our data is too informed by practices that exclude others. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, there was a second part of that question about retrofit of, thank you, Marie, of existing spaces.
Well, yeah, I think, and also, I mean, in a way, what Simon's doing in Tirana is creating new school streets, which is retrofitting, and obviously it costs money. And I think the thing about playing out as a movement was that they were coming at it from a different perspective, and they were saying, you know, how can we change the streets that we've got already? So that I guess this book is about new housing, but the answer is, well, we need to start to kind of do the same thing in a retrofit situation, but obviously it's money where the development doesn't sort of unlock it. I guess 106. I mean, essentially, we need a kind of mindset change, don't we? And to not answer your question, but to say something else. Like, if I hear another person ask me that we need to provide evidence as to why play might be good, it's like, we just need to move away on from that now, right? We know it's good, and we need to get on with it. So when we're doing kind of retrofit schemes, and you might want to use the phrase low traffic neighbourhood, I don't know. Yeah, you just made a face, and I can barely see you, but you looked like you were grimacing. Yeah, I know it is. My parents lived in Haringey. Well, I grew up in Haringey. Why the hell didn't we centre it on children? Why was it about cyclists? Why was it about men? I'm sorry. Why were men arguing with each other about it? Why didn't we focus on the damage that this is doing to children? Why are streets just about the moving adult? Why don't we start with children? I've got a pyramid where I always say, why don't we start with how children use space? And that's what we're doing on the analysis. In Northstowe, it's like they don't do the same things as the moving adult and the moving pedestrian. So LTNs have become a fight between moving people, adults. So in a way, we went down the wrong argument, didn't we? So that would be my, start with children.
Thank you. There's another question in the middle here. Maybe, because we are actually close to time, maybe we'll just hear two questions and then ask the panel to respond, please.
On?
Yes.
My name is Anke. I live in Islington, and I've got 2 children, 11 and 14. And thank you for Dina for doing the book and presenting the different typologies. I just have one question about the perimeter block. I mean, most of the examples you showed were perimeter blocks which had at ground level courtyards, so to say. Did you do some research as well as podium courtyards? Because they are elevated from the street, obviously, and we see a lot of planning applications with which place a lot of play equipment on these elevated courtyard, and what would be the implication? Have you done any research on that?
Okay, let's go with that. And there's another question here. So that one's on podium. Maybe Johnny also has some thoughts on that. Okay.
Hi, my name's Louise Whitley. I work for the House of Commons, so mine is a policy question. If you got the Secretary of State, Angela Rayner, in a room, what would be your one policy ask? Would it be to do with the NPPF? Would it be to do with national development management policies? What was the thing that you would change to get these spaces built for children?
Perfect. Okay, that would be a good sum up question. We'll just go along the panel, a quick short fire answer to Angela Rayner. But to start with the podium, Dinah.
Yes, there's at least one in there, and I think podium's less successful, and I don't know about in Islington, but I'm seeing less of them for other reasons, and I think there's other ways that we need to kind of think about the playing child in that space rather than just putting stuff in there. So the book's got quite a lot on that. Control F, any document that's a planning document. Sorry, Johnny just asked me for an answer. I've just taken it away from him. I'm going to have to give it. Yeah, Command F, Control F. If you put in play, it will come up with a word. It will use it in different contexts. If you put in child, as in child and children, and play, just see how many times it comes up. Like multiply that. If it's 0, you can't multiply it by anything. But if it's 1, which is the NPPF at the moment, multiply that by 50, because otherwise they're never going to get considered. So that would be my one suggestion to Angela.
Okay. Is that your suggestion to Angela?
To Mrs. Rayner.
Okay.
Rayner.
So we've got the House of Commons here. So maybe I'll start from the end. I think
I have no idea who that is, but. But given a room with any decision maker at any level, as a school street... Oh, okay. Deputy Prime Minister, as a school streets evangelist, I want to give you a suggestion, which is really concrete, and to move a little bit away from principles and kind of generic, child's rights and like, et cetera, et cetera. We've had that for a really long time, and it just really is not making very much change because it's so easy to ignore. Miss Deputy Prime Minister, budget to protect every school with a school street in every town within the next 5 years. They're just such successful projects, and they are really, and I mean permanently. I don't mean on a timed schedule in the morning. I mean, take away the parking, widen the sidewalk, make it slow, and make it a public place that the entire neighborhood enjoys. That is a successful project that will change hearts and minds and can scale into other types of urban projects afterward. But you start with school streets.
Thank you.
With a budget.
Marie, have you got a final call to action?
Hopefully it's not too controversial. I would say, policymaker, take away the choice. I find too many times we work with housing developers, different organizations who choose to have play at the beginning, and then they find ways to say there's no budget, or they've got another reason why we should use our section, other reasons not to afford play. So take away that, I really think that that choice to provide what children intrinsically need, the same way they intrinsically need to participate in making our spaces. If policy has so much power, that's what I would want. It's controversial.
Brilliant. Johnny?
My one's going to be a Command F. No, it's not really. I think it's about, for me, the big ask would be about innovation and diversification. I think we know that diversification in the housing sector is top, is a recognised need. But I think we need to think about diversification not being about getting just smaller companies to build out the same problematic stuff when instead of bigger companies. That's fine from a kind of economic point of view. It kind of probably is helpful. But if we're going to do diversification, let's take some risks about it. And actually, some of the big organisations, institutional organisations even, are very good at understanding what it is to take risk. We're working with the Crown Estate in Hemel to do a totally different kind of project. The Crown Estate understands that with innovation comes risk, and it's willing to test some of this stuff out really, really actively. I think we need to see more emphasis on innovation rather than just pure kind of diversification. And that means using the levers that government has, which is around policy and critically land and subsidy, and recognising that you don't get any of this without accepting less, financial return at the outset for that land. is really important. We need to get much more. You know, we've got probably 5 years, 10 years before new towns come. You know, as I say, are coming on. We should be using that to test everything out and see what works. And I'm sure that the kind of things that Dinah is championing in her book are the things that in the end are valuable to consumers, because we're all humans. We all do value our children, and we should be practicing what we preach and testing it out for real.
Thank you. And if I can add one, I think it is also recognition that it's a cross-departmental thing as well. It's Department of Education, Health, all of these things benefit from putting the child at the centre. But that is all we've got time for. So please thank our panel, and thank you for the questions in the audience.